still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Relationship Podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by adamandeve.com, where for a limited time only, you'll get 50% off of just about any item on their website. Just enter the promo code RELATION at checkout. That's RELATION. Again, welcome to the GSMC Relationship Podcast. I am your host, Sarah, and I hope you're having a good week. It is Monday. I keep seeing on Facebook the meme that has the Grinch standing up on the mountain looking down at the Who village, and you know, in the cartoon version, the Grinch says, "I must stop Christmas from coming, but how?" Well, someone has changed it to say, "I must stop Monday from coming, but how?" And sadly, no matter how much we want it not to, Monday still comes. And maybe that doesn't mean anything to you because you work over the weekend. I used to work on Sundays and Mondays were my day off. So actually Mondays used to be awesome for me because I got to sleep in and, run errands and do all those great things. So now I'm back to a more, I don't want to say normal because that's not right, but a schedule, a Monday through Friday schedule. Let's just put it that way. So Mondays are back to being like, oh man, I got to get up. I got to be responsible in the morning and actually get up at the right time and do all those things. So that's just my random Monday thought for you today, not really having anything to do with anything except that, hey, it's Monday. So welcome to the show. And we are going to stop talking about Mondays and start talking about relationships. And today I want to talk about your relationship when you're trying to figure out what to do with it. And I think I mentioned either last week or the week before that I have a friend who would always encourage her friends to have a DTR with their significant other, a define the relationship. What are you doing in this relationship? And that's kind of what this episode is about, the DTR, defining the relationship. Should you break up? Should you take your relationship to the next level, whether that's marriage, moving in together, committing yourselves to one another in a way that's maybe not marriage, however you see that, or should you just maintain the status quo and stay the way you are? Depending on where you are in this relationship, you might be having this conversation. You might be having it with your significant other, or you might just be having it with yourself. And so this came up because as I was reading today, I found an article from Psychology Today, and it's actually from December 28th, 2014. So it's an older article, but it still holds true. And it is that it asks that very question. Should you marry, break up, or maintain the status quo? And this comes from Marty Nemko, who is a PhD. And he asks that question. Should you marry the person that you're with? Should you break up? Should you maintain that status quo? And I like what he says at the very beginning of the article. He says, "It's perhaps life's biggest decision, yet too many people choose a car more rationally." So think about how you buy a car, or how some people buy a car. They do a lot of research. They look at the safety features. They look at the ratings. They look at the cost point. They do all of this research trying to figure out if this is the right decision for them. And a car is going to be with you, in theory, a lot less time than a potential spouse or significant other. Maybe not always, but that's probably the expectation of a lot of people. So how do we choose partners in life? Well, we tend to rely on emotion. And of course, you want that to factor in. Of course, it's going to play a huge part. Do you love this person? Do you care for this person? And yet we often don't bring rationality to counterbalance the emotion. The emotion, of course, is important, but there's also other things to consider when you are trying to figure out, do I love this person enough to take that next step with them? Do I want to wait a while, maintain the status quo, and see how things go? Or should we break up? Maybe we aren't compatible. So this PhD, Marty Nemko, lists several things that you should consider when contemplating this question. Now, of course, just using a list and going through and doing pros and cons and checking things off that list ignores the emotional aspect of your relationship. And in the end, of course, you're going to want to ask yourself, do I love this person? Do I love this person so much that I want to spend the rest of my life with him or her, however that looks? You have to bring the emotional into it, but it's important to ask certain questions about your potential significant other to see if, to at least, even if you are dead set on marrying them, moving in with them, whatever it is, at least look at these key factors to see if there's going to be issues down the road that you're going to need to work through that maybe you haven't already communicated about, or maybe you've communicated about them and you disagree, but one of you is hoping that the other one will change. And that doesn't often happen, right? We hope that, once we're married or once we've moved in together or once we've taken this next step, that person will change. I'll get them to change. And that rarely happens. So I do want to look at this list that the good doctor has given us. And so it starts with a compatible level of intelligence. And that may sound a little bit snobby when you think of it. Well, I'm smart enough. And I don't look down on other people who aren't smart. And it's not necessarily about who's smarter. A compatible level of intelligence means, are you interested in the same things in terms of what you like to debate? Let's say your partner loves politics and he or she is really, really intelligent about politics. They're very informed about politics and they love to talk about politics. They will debate the candidates. They will debate the issues. They will debate. And you aren't so much into politics. Now, this doesn't mean that you can never have a conversation about politics, but maybe that's not the thing that you want to debate. And especially, during election years, you don't want to constantly having conversations. That's something to think about. It doesn't mean that your partner is smarter than you. Maybe in this one way, your partner is more informed than you are, or maybe you are informed as well, but this isn't your cup of tea, so you don't want to talk about politics on a regular basis, right? Maybe you like to talk about books. Maybe you love to read and your partner doesn't. Or they don't like to read the same things as you. Or really, maybe they don't like to read. And so you love this book that you're reading and you want to either just focus on reading it and getting through the story, or you want to talk to your partner about it and you bring up the subject and your partner says, yeah, whatever, that's fine. Let's talk about the election. So different levels of intelligence doesn't necessarily mean I'm smarter than you or you're smarter than me. It means you could have different levels of intelligence in the ways that you communicate about what topics you communicate, and that might make you not enjoy conversing about the same things. Of course, there could be a definite IQ difference, and that could limit the conversations that you have. Again, not meaning to sound snobby here, but it's just a matter of communication, and it does make a difference what your experiences are, and intellectual experiences can make a difference also in what you like to talk about and how you communicate. And if your partner isn't at that same level, then you may find it hard to have conversations because you're just not quite on the same level when it comes to what you want to talk about. So that's the first one. The second one is similar sex drive. Now, we've said before that sex isn't everything all the time, but it is very important. And if you have incompatible sex drives, it doesn't mean that it is that you shouldn't pursue that next level, but it's something that you want to consider. If you have a much higher sex drive than your partner just, for whatever reason, doesn't have as high of a level, that can later on cause some issues, right? There are things that you will want and your partner won't, and you might find yourself having that conversation of, well, I've always been like this. Why is it bothering you now? That is such a common conversation in long-term relationships, right? You figure, this is okay, we can work through this. And then 6 months, 5 years, 20 years down the line, whatever it is, you're like, I keep telling you that my sex drive is up here. And your partner says, well, and I've always told you that my sex drive is right here, so I don't know why we're arguing about this now. So it doesn't mean that you can't pursue a relationship, but it does mean that you need to figure out what you're both willing to live with, what you're both willing to maybe compromise a little bit on. And if you find that you are not willing to compromise and bring your level down to meet your partner's, or your partner isn't willing to compromise to bring theirs up a little bit occasionally to meet yours, then that can cause issues where the partner with the higher sex drive might start seeking other means to achieve his or her desires, right? To find an outlet for those desires. And sometimes these things work. You know, you hear of couples who have open relationships and they are free to see other people, to have other people meet those physical needs, etc. It can work. You hear that, you know, there's been studies done where it does work, but you can't go into a marriage or the next step of your relationship without at least a little bit of understanding where you are in terms of your sex drive. So you can't, it's going to be harder to figure that out later. Now, maybe later you have that conversation and you agree that there's something that you can do wherein both people's needs are met. All I'm saying is it's a potential stumbling block, and you need to be aware of the fact that it could come up later. It could create problems for you later. And is this something that you want to not address and have it become an issue later that you may or may not be able to overcome? So it's all about figuring out how compatible you are now, how compatible you may or may not be in the future, and if this potentially will create a rift between you and your partner. So the second two are related: enjoying each other in bed and enjoying each other out of bed. So enjoying each other in bed is important. It's good to have, again, a partner with similar sexual desires and a sex drive as you. And it's nice to have someone in bed who meets your needs and understands your needs and is able to tell you his or her needs so that you are able to meet their needs. It's great to have that communication when it comes to sex, and it's great to enjoy each other in bed. You know, it shouldn't be a chore. It shouldn't be just something to get over and done with because you think it's part of the relationship. It should be enjoyable, and you should each find it mutually fulfilling. But it shouldn't be the only thing that you have in your lives, right? You should enjoy each other out of bed. Also, if you have great sex, but you can't stand each other outside of the bedroom, then you may want to DTR. You may want to define your relationship as, well, maybe we just are really, really good at sleeping together, having sex, meeting those mutual desires, fulfilling those mutual desires, but we aren't going to date. And we just need to define that right now. If you enjoy each other out of bed, you have similar interests, you have similar conversation patterns, you have, everything, you do the same things, you love to do the same things, but you don't enjoy each other in bed, that's something else you need to consider. Is that going to be, again, a stumbling block to your relationship? Is that something that is going to be the thing that drives you apart eventually, where you love this person, you enjoy this person, but there's this one major area of your life where you do not enjoy this person? Again, something to think about. So we are going through this list of things to think about as you contemplate taking those next steps in your relationship. And we're going to take our first break of the podcast. So stay tuned. And when we come back, we'll be continuing on with this list. You're listening to the GSMC Relationship Podcast, and we will be right back. So since we were just speaking about sex drive and enjoying one another in bed, I'm going to ask you, are you maybe looking to spice things up in the bedroom? Have you been fantasizing about surprising your lover with an adventurous new toy or a new adult movie? Well, here's an offer that you won't be able to resist. Just go to adamandeve.com, where for a limited time, you will get 50% off of just about any item on their website. And that's not all, because when you select that item at 50% off, you'll also receive 3 free adult DVDs, plus a free mystery gift. Can't even tell you what it is. And to top it all off, they'll even throw in free shipping on your entire order. No, they aren't kidding. Just check out adamandeve.com today for this special offer. You're going to get 50% off of that one item when you type the word relation into the promo code at checkout. When you do, again, you'll get that 50% off your one item. You'll get 3 free DVDs, a free extra gift, and free shipping. Just use that offer code relation at adamandeve.com. That's RELATION, relation at adamandeve.com. And we're back with the GSMC Relationship Podcast, where we are talking about a few things to consider when you're trying to decide if you should take your relationship to the next level, if you should completely go the opposite direction and break up with your significant other, or if you should just maintain the status quo, see how things go, maybe make that decision later. So we have had compatible level of intelligence, similar sex drive, enjoying each other in bed, enjoying each other out of bed. And now the next one is how loving/giving the person is. This again is a level of compatibility. So it's not saying if someone isn't loving or giving, that is a deal breaker, because not everyone is the same level of loving and giving. And if you find a partner who is less loving and giving, but so are you, then you might be compatible. But if you are incredibly loving and giving, and you enjoy showing your love in certain ways, you enjoy showing your love, you enjoy expressing your love verbally, you enjoy giving to your partner, and really showing that level of emotion through different expressions of love, different ways of giving, whether that's, just special treats, gifts out of the blue, doing, special things for your partner, that's great. But if you're expecting the same level back from your partner and he or she isn't that way, are you going to eventually feel resentful? Because again, you're not going to necessarily change a person's entire personality simply by marrying them or moving in with them. You can try, but more often than not, you're just going to find yourself nagging, screaming, crying, whatever it is, to get them to do what you think they should do, and they may or may not change, or they may change outwardly, they may appear to change, but they're just doing it to get you off their back, and they're resentful of the fact that they are doing what they're doing because it's not what they signed up for, right? So you need to assess your compatibility in terms of the way you express your love. Do you express that verbally? Do you express it through action? How giving are you in terms of the way you express that love? And what are you looking for in return? Are you looking for the same level? There's give and take in here, of course. There's wiggle room. It doesn't have to be, you're never going to find the person that is exactly 1,000% perfect in every way, shape, and form. That doesn't happen. Relationships are a series of compromises, a series of figuring out what you want, figuring out what your partner wants, figuring out where the middle ground is. So if your partner is less loving or giving than you are, that could be a problem. It could also be a problem if your partner is more loving or giving than you are. You know, it goes both ways. If you are a person who shows your love through actions, maybe you were raised to be a provider, and so you figure that by doing your part toward the family budget and, you know, bringing in your paycheck, etc., or doing your part to provide for your partner and your family in whatever way you see that, then that's enough. But your partner expresses the same thing through different actions or through words. That can cause tension. And if it's not expressed and talked about, then one partner will think, well, I'm doing exactly, I love this person. I don't know why they don't know it. I show it all the time. But you're showing it in a way that maybe they aren't fully understanding. So figuring out how you express those things, and that has a lot to do with your family of origin. You know, you model how your parents did things. You either model it subconsciously or you consciously try to model something different because you weren't happy with the way it was modeled for you, whether that was unhealthy or just wasn't the way you wanted your future relationship to be. So another thing to keep in mind. The next one is a compatible desire for having or not having children. Decide this beforehand. There is, of course, a possibility that someone could change his or her mind down the road. But chances are good if someone absolutely does not want children and the other person really, really, really wants a family, that is going to cause problems because once again, it can lead to resentment on both parts. You really, really want children and your partner doesn't, but you figure, oh, they'll come around. We'll get to that down the road. And then down the road, they say, but I've never wanted children. I still don't want children. We've had this conversation. I've listed my reasons for not wanting children. That's going to cause a problem. You're either going to stay with that person and resent him or her because you've had to give up something that maybe you've been dreaming about your whole life, or you will have to decide if it's, you have to figure out, is it worth staying with that person? Which is more important? You're saving your relationship or fulfilling that desire to have children. And also, if you don't want children and your partner does, you need to make your feelings clear too, because you are going to be resentful later in life when they keep telling you that they want children and you keep saying, I don't. So it can cause problems. You just need to discuss that and discuss not only having children, but the time frame for having children and the number that you want. Of course, there's always some surprises. Even when we're completely careful, we can still have some surprises, but don't just go into a relationship and have sex willy-nilly and not expect to get pregnant without having that conversation first, okay? Birth control, people, it's not hard. It's important for so many reasons, not just getting pregnant, not getting pregnant, but STDs. Have the birth control conversation. That's a different podcast, but birth control, important. Use it. Love it. Okay. Compatible values around spending and saving. Oh, yeah. How were you raised to think about money? How were you raised to talk about money? Did your family talk about money? How did your parents go about communicating with each other how they were going to spend the money? Was one parent in charge of the budget, or did they talk about it as a couple? Those things shape us. Our families of origin shape us. And so again, you may model your parents' behavior when it comes to money, or you may have grown up and thought, I am absolutely not doing that. I'm going to do it this way. But then you have to talk about that with your potential partner. If you are really, really conservative and like to save, and your partner is not as conservative and doesn't have a problem spending money, and maybe they think they're being conservative. Maybe they think they are saving money, but they have created a different system in their mind for which money is for bills, which money is for saving, which money is for spending. You have to figure out if you are compatible in terms of those levels, because money is something that can cause so many fights and so many problems in a relationship, especially when you don't have it and you're trying to figure out what to do, what to pay, how to deal with that, and the other person is like, "We'll be fine. I'm going to go buy some new shoes, or I'm going to go buy a new whatever it is." That can be so stressful on a relationship, and it needs to be discussed. The next one, how respectful the person is of you and how respectful you are of the person. How respectful you are towards each other. This covers pretty much everything we've talked about already, I think, because a level of respect can really get you through a lot of these conversations. If you are condescending to your partner or your partner is condescending to you, that is not conducive to a helpful conversation. That's not going to lead to a helpful conversation. It's going to lead to anger and resentment. If you are dismissive of your partner's feelings on any of these subjects, that's not going to be helpful. So how respectful you are to one another. Do you really truly listen to your partner? Do they listen to you? Do they listen in order to have a conversation, or do they listen just long enough that they can attempt to refute your argument? Do you treat each other with respect when it comes to how you argue? Again, do you try to maintain a level of respect in your conversations, or would you prefer to just scream obscenities at one another? There's all kinds of levels of respect. Do you respect each other's personal space? Do you respect each other's families? Even if you don't like each other's families, do you respect your partner's feelings about your family, his or her family, and how are you going to deal with that? So respect is a really, really important one because it dictates how you are going to communicate going forward, and it dictates how your relationship is going to unfold. If one of you doesn't respect the other, it's not going to pretty much ever lead to healthy communication or a healthy relationship, because one of you will always be dismissive of the other, and the other will, that person who's being dismissed constantly is going to feel, they're going to feel dismissed, right? And they're going to feel disrespected, and they might feel unloved, and they are eventually going to, even if they're suppressing that suppressed anger turns to depression, and that's not going to be healthy for either one of you. So respect. It's World Kindness Day. Did you know that today is November 13th is World Kindness Day, and kindness and respect go hand in hand, right? So be kind, always be respectful, always. That is greater than just the relationship with your significant other. Being respectful, being kind to everyone that you meet is important, because what is that saying? Be kind because you never know the battles that people are facing, that you don't know what they're facing. You don't know what they're going through. My other favorite one is be kind. You don't know who lost an argument with a 3-year-old this morning. So there's all kinds of variations, some more serious than others. But we are going to take our second break of the podcast. And when we come back, we'll be concluding with this list. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back with the GSMC Relationship Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
And welcome back to the GSMC Relationship Podcast. We are going to conclude this episode with the last few items on this list that helps you determine, at least from the rational standpoint, whether you should marry or move ahead with your relationship, whether you should break up or whether you should maintain that status quo. So the next one is acceptable physical health, and this is determined by each person. So everyone knows their limit for what they can handle. If you know that you cannot be in a relationship with a person that does not have an acceptable level of physical health, then you need to address that. Yes, it's not going to be a pleasant conversation. No, we never want to seem like the person who is dismissing or being disrespectful of a person who has physical ailments, but everyone has their level of what they can handle, and everyone has to figure that out for themselves. On this one, there's no formula. There's no way. Some people are just caregivers to the core, and they have no problem dealing with anything from minor physical health problems to major physical health problems. It's more about all the other things on this list and how those fit in and how they feel about that person. Their physical health isn't an issue. Other people, it might be that one thing that they just cannot face or cannot deal with. And there's a lot of reasons for this. You may have had someone extremely close to you who went through physical problems, or who you were a caretaker for and who died. I mean, there's just so many different elements of things that can go into how you feel about physical health. And it's something that you need to consider. And you might say, it's fine. I love this person, we'll be fine. But you have to know that being a caretaker is extraordinarily stressful. It can put huge stress on a relationship, and it's not easy for either person. It's stressful for both partners, whether you are the person who is doing the caretaking or whether you're the person who's being cared for, because you may eventually feel guilty or resentful about having to be taken care of. So figure out what is acceptable to you in your partner's physical health, and know that physical health is not going to be exactly the same for your entire relationship. Things happen. And as you get older, both of you are going to have changes in your physical health. So it's going to change. But when you're at the beginning of a relationship, you have to figure out what are those things that you are unwilling to accept at this point in the relationship, knowing that relationships tend to get more complicated with time, right? As you both grow, as your family changes, as your lives change both singly and together, as your parents get older. I mean, there are so many things that change as you get older, as your relationship continues and grows and evolves. So these are things, if you are uncomfortable with any of these levels that we've talked about on this list now, just know that it's probably going to get infinitely more complicated as your relationship goes on. And think about where your level. of acceptability is. And I think I can't remember if I mentioned it on this show, but I had a professor in grad school who would always say, choose which ditches you're willing to die in. If that is a ditch that you just absolutely, no, it's a deal breaker, you have to be aware of that. Know what is acceptable to you and what you can handle. The next one on the list is whether he or she has a substance abuse problem. This is a huge one, and everyone has their own definition of this. This could be anything from drugs, illegal drugs, to prescription drugs, to alcohol, to smoking. Everyone has their level of what they can handle in a partner. And if your partner, let's just say on the one end, if your partner is a smoker and you hate it, well, you're going into this relationship knowing that you hate it. You can certainly encourage your partner to quit smoking because, you want the best for them. You want their best health going forward. But they have to want to quit. It's not for you to just go in. It's like everything else. You can't really change your partner to a huge extent. So if smoking is a problem, you need to decide if it is a deal-breaking problem or if it's something that you can live with. But don't go into it thinking, oh, it's fine. As soon as we get married, I'll make him or her quit. Now, alcohol and drugs can be a bigger issue because there can be legal issues in terms of, driving under the influence or buying illegal drugs. All kinds of things can come from that. And unfortunately, the worse the substance abuse problem is, then the more problems it's going to cause. And people who have really entrenched substance abuse problems, well, they're not going to be terribly healthy, and they're not going to be emotionally stable, and, they are not going to be a giving and loving partner in the way that you might expect. It's not going to be, the balance is going to be off in your relationship. So these are things that you have to decide. Is this something that I am willing to try to work with my partner on? If you think that you can help your partner kick that abuse problem, and that's something that you are willing to fight for, that's one thing. But know and understand why you're doing it. Go into it with your eyes open. Make sure you understand what you are getting yourself into and where your partner is at in terms of, do they even want to give up whatever they are addicted to? Do they even acknowledge that they have a problem? And then this last one is how emotionally together your partner is. And this could include issues such as anger or gambling issues. I mean, how emotionally together is your partner? And again, this comes to a level of how emotionally together are you, and do you fit together? You have to figure out, basically, let's say this entire list is really, really knowing yourself first, and then figuring out together, and hopefully your partner knows him or herself really well also. First, you have to really know yourselves, and then you can figure out who you're going to be together. If you are in denial about yourself and the way you handle any of these issues, then you're not going to go into a relationship with a clear vision. You are going to go into a relationship with the idea of, I'm fine. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. Well, it might be a big deal. It might be a big deal later to you when you realize, oh my gosh, I didn't realize this bothered me so much. It might be a big deal later to your partner when they realize that you have been holding back certain things because you didn't realize you didn't do the work, the emotional work for yourself before going into a relationship. So there's all of these levels. And if this sounds scary, it's kind of meant to. I mean, relationships are important. And if someone is important enough to you to want to pursue a relationship with, in terms of a long-term relationship, then you need to be serious about it. You need to think about what you want from a relationship. Does that partner seem as though they are going to be a good fit? Again, it's never going to be 1,000% perfect, but are your differences minor enough that you'll be able to work together, you'll be able to compromise, you'll be able to figure out ways around your differences that work for both of you? And then you can move forward. And maybe the answer to those is no, I don't think the differences are minor enough that I can move forward. And you may want to break up with that person. Maybe you haven't been together long enough to completely figure out if those differences are major or minor. And so you want to maintain that status quo and see how things go for a little while longer. Maybe you do want to move forward. Maybe you have gone through this entire list. You love that person and you want to spend a big chunk of the rest of your life with them. But I will also say this. Don't just have this conversation in your own head. Yes, you need to have this internal dialogue with yourself, but don't just decide this for both of you and then make the decision. Talk to your partner. See where they are. See if they are on the same page. It's all about communication. I think we just don't communicate enough these days, and it's hard. I know. I would so much rather just read a book than talk about hard things. Just let me disappear into someone else's world for a while and avoid that conflict. Can we do that? Is that okay? Well, no, because I'm going to avoid, and then I'm going to repress, and then I'm going to get angry and depressed. And it's just a cycle, right? Communicate. Communicate with yourself. See where you are on all of these things, and then communicate with your partner and try to figure out how you can get, if not on exactly the same page, how you can get closer and find an agreement that you can both agree on and live with, and that will make your relationship healthy and strong, and you can move forward. So that is the list of things to consider outside of emotional, because emotional is going to be part of all of these, but things to consider when you are contemplating where to take your relationship. Should you take it to the next level? Should you maintain the status quo? Should you break up? I wish you good luck if you're in this phase. I wish you good searching, good soul searching, and then I wish you good communication, first with yourself and then with your significant other. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you will join me again next time. As always, I'll see you again next week on Monday. In the meantime, you can find not just this podcast, but all of our podcasts at www.gsmcpodcast.com. You can download those podcasts on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, any app that you use for your mobile device. And finally, you can follow us and interact with us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Tumblr, and Instagram. So come find us on social media. I hope you have a great week. And in the meantime, happy communicating. Thank you, and I'll talk to you next time.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.